Last week, the point of my sermon was a rejection of nihilism. I wanted to speak on the fact that there's this growing energy of life has no meaning, that there is no real substance. So why work? Why strive? Why be honest if there is nothing to really compel me to a more moral or upright life? And I tried to argue that being a Christian, in particular a progressive Christian, that if Jesus died and was resurrected through the words of Paul, that not only do you matter, not only do you have purpose, but because of the death and resurrection of Jesus, everything you do matters. Everything you do has purpose, for God remembers all of it. All of it is embraced by a God who recognizes each and every little thing. Now, I don't know how well I did, but I do know this. Today's point is not just to remember this, that God embraces us in our moments, but calls us to a particular kind of love. Today's reading, and in the context of it, we get Peter. And let me tell you, there are 12 apostles. I love Peter. You know, if this is your first Sunday, if this is your last Sunday with me, the one lesson, you know, when I get to retire, the thing that I will have said, I've tried to teach every person who has ever called me pastor, is if you don't see yourself in the Bible, you're not reading it properly. And if you ever want to know what me personally feels like, when I read a story about St. Peter, I see me. Because Peter is both. He totally gets it and completely misses it all at the same time. The Lutherans, God bless them. God help them. There's grace for that, and they would agree. Well, they have a particular theology called sinner saint. You are both all at the same time, all at once. You are an utter sinner and you are an utter saint. And you know, maybe I'm arguing angels on the head of a pin, but I don't hold that. Methodism actually, through our more variant understanding of faith in God and human participation, is that we are in motion. Time is fluid, and you have agency. So you have some choice in the matter. So here's Peter in flux. He isn't both at the same time. He actually goes from the rock to Satan in about 10 seconds, and I can totally feel that. Why? I can feel like at the end of a restaurant, I'm like, I have been generous to my server. And as I'm walking out, I end up thinking curses about the person who's too slow getting out the door. I have moved suddenly from a place of grace and love, and without any real change in me. But in the drive home, suddenly, see, Peter gets something. When people ask, who do you say that I am? Peter's got it. How many Christians who you would say, you know, if I just took you on your word, I would say you're a Christian. Based off what you say Jesus is in your life. You have Christian written all over you. You got that cross necklace. You're still wearing the WWJD bracelet from the 90s. You're as Jesus as it comes off what you're saying. But if you really dig into the words of what Peter thinks this means, he's kind of missed it. So, because Jesus goes on to argue this, you know, in order for me to be the Messiah, there's going to be a crucifixion. You know, the Holy One has to suffer and die. He's got to go through this rejection, so much so that they're actually going to put the Messiah in the dirt. And Peter's reaction, it's not a bad one. It's natural. He wants to save his teacher. He doesn't want the person he gave up his whole regular life for to go through suffering and death. He wants to protect it. He wants to protect the life he is living right now because he kind of likes it. He's finding purpose. He just got called the Rock. Come on, man. I need some job security. And if I'm not moving up the chain here, I can't. And maybe I'm not so different. Maybe we are not so different. We love the idea of a God who loves us as we are and calls us to love. But a love that means sacrifice, of denying our own self. I don't know about that. And every generation of Christian, every person who tries to follow the words of a Jewish carpenter must face this truth again. The call of Jesus will always run against self-preservation. You can get it right. You can get the title, but you can still miss something. And God is always calling us. There's the church, there's the pastor of the small town. She worked tirelessly. When she got appointed to that local church, she worked tirelessly to get their finances in order. She begged, borrowed, whatever she could do just to get the dollars and cents to line up because she wanted to set up this congregation for the next pastor. She knew she wasn't going to be able to enjoy the fruits of her labor, but she just had to get it set up. And they paid off the mortgage. They settled their old debt. They finally were able to pay a okay salary. And then the news hits. There's this bequest, this member that they never knew had any kind of money, just left them this pile. And when it hits, when it shows up, there's a flood in the town. Several of the church members and community folk are homeless. The insurance isn't paying what it should. And there's a slow energy within the congregation to take the beneficial gift and give it away. The pastor, when she's being honest, doesn't want to do it. It's the challenge of Jesus to give, and give. There's the dad. He raised his daughter to be a servant. He's going, you know what? It's about, you are born into privilege. You have a lot, and to those who have been given, much is required. He brought her to food shelf offerings. He made sure that she tithed her allowance. He brought her on missions trips, and not just the safe ones, the slightly scary ones. He walked her into a good character formation. She graduates from college with a degree in social work. And you know what she's going to do? She's going to go to a war-torn country. And in response to this news, he puts full brakes. That's not what I meant. I didn't want you to go over there. You have to stay here. He almost ruins the relationship with her because he can't let her go. Fear is a natural result of love because it can hardly imagine that relationship changing. Quick side note, I got a couple of these little vignettes. Fear. Did you notice what Jesus said? Get behind me, Satan, to Peter? He didn't say get away. If the reaction of Peter is fear, get behind me. Fear, for those of you who have anxiety and anxiousness, those of you who are always wondering about the worst thing that could possibly happen, I'm not saying fear doesn't belong in the car. All right? If your life is a car, fear has a place, but it's not behind the wheel and it doesn't get to pick the music. Fear is in the back seat. That's where it belongs. There's the veteran. Whether it's a police veteran, military veteran, doesn't matter. Served a long time. He's in rural Minnesota, and he's this big character, larger than life, joyous, always brings something to the potluck, and it's always meat. And you know, he can't sing worth a tune, but everybody can hear him. And his favorite thing to do is volunteer with the youth group. Absolute favorite thing. To teach, because he loves the Bible. And then the pastor says that for the next 6 weeks we're talking about forgiveness and loving your enemy. And he quietly takes his name off the volunteer list. See, this veteran has seen such real violence, such real pain, that he is incapable of seeing forgiveness as strength. There's the business owner, started from the ground up, scrappy. After decades, she's putting things together, being a just employer. She wanted to pay people what they were worth and establish a business that could outlast her. And it was a steady climb of growth. Had some bad years, and then it became obvious that she could retire early. What it would take? Some, quote, funny accounting. Not exactly an honest communication with her staff about rate increases or bonuses. A little change to the legal practice. Everything's completely legal about how she's going to change her model for business, but it doesn't pass the sniff test of ethical. She can secure her future, but the price is her honesty and her integrity. There's this grandmother. Sorry, I didn't mean to point at anybody. I'm just saying. None of these people are in here. I'll say this. There's a grandmother, and she goes to this Perkins after church every Sunday to play cards with her friends. And they usually serve up roast preacher because it's Sunday. What else are you going to do? And it's pretty clear that the church states what it's going to state about all this, quote, woke nonsense. And she's pretty sure that her friends are all in a huff about the direction that this world is going. And she's kind of inclined to agree until her grandchild, shaking in their boots, tells them that they're trans. She knows her commitment to her grandchild. She doesn't know what to do with this card game at Perkins on Sunday. St. Peter is in every one of us. In our fear of loss, in our instinct to protect rather than to trust, in our desire for all the good things of a religious life or a spiritual life without any of the sacrifice or death that comes with it. We are all, depending on our time, either a rock upon which someone else may build their faith or a stumbling block to the person with whom we share a pew. We can confess Christ with our lips and then steer away from the road that leads to any kind of cross. And Jesus tells us that the only way to find our life is to give it away. And this, my friends, is the paradox of faith. No problem. They need to hear it too. The paradox of faith is that whatever you hold most precious, your time, your energy, your money, your striving, this is what God asks for you to give up. The culture we live in tells us to hustle, to climb, to grind. A culture that tells us build your resume as thick and as well-rounded as possible. And Jesus tells us to build up a soul. You dare not be inconvenienced. Jesus says, giving up your life is a terribly big inconvenience. But there's resurrection on the other end. If you think of any example of where charity is expected, where you offer up, ask any teacher. Ask anybody who's ever volunteered in a Sunday school, who gets more out of Sunday school, the kids or the teacher? Every time you've ever given a money to a charity and ever felt, well, that was just went down the... No. Maybe faith really is this, not certainty, but surrender. Not the victory of the strong, but the beauty of a life given up. Maybe it's not just about finding a singular purpose or meaning that combats nihilism, but a breaking open of your life, having your love poured out so that in the pouring out you may be made whole once again. And maybe, just maybe, when all is given, you may find life, and life more abundant. Maybe so for you, in spirit of hope. Amen.